I think it's a sexual act between people that's recorded in a natural setting and is obviously staged, and it doesn't represent the real, true reality of sex.
I think porn is a film where two adults, or an adult and a minor, engage in sexual activities.
It's a bit relativistic, but it's kind of, you know when you see it, but I think there's got to be a sexual content designed to arouse you in some way. There's a clean word for aroused. I came up with all sorts of ones that I probably shouldn't say on camera, but aroused. So some sexual content that aims to make you aroused, and that in some way objectifies the players who are acting in it. I think I would make arousal and objectification crucial. And actually you might want to take sex out, because some people are aroused by all sorts of different things, aren't they?
When the idea of porn kind of comes to mind, I feel like it's recorded sex, but very put on, kind of like foreplay kind of thing. So very put on, over-sexualised sex between a man and a woman, but it's over the top, kind of unrealistic sex.
Could you please introduce yourself to the camera?
My name's Millie Martin and I'm 17 years old and a student at Hillsmith College. I think it's definitely affected and damaged the views of women and what women are supposed to look like, and the ideas of like shaving and how big your breasts are and your bum, and I think that's been really sexualised, and kind of it's this idea now that people need to fall into. Just the unrealistic kind of relationship between a man and a woman, or a woman and a woman, and you know, whatever it might be. I think it's just really unrealistic and not based on respect or intimacy really. It's kind of just sex, and it's kind of giving this false impression of what a healthy relationship should be, or what a healthy sex life should be, and I think it makes it really unrealistic, and it's quite damaging for young people. Since everyone's kind of watching it, I think the views are kind of shared without throughout the year groups, and it's definitely influenced the way that I feel boys talk about girls. I'll sit around a table with certain boys and I'm quite disgusted by the way they talk about other girls, and I think that's definitely been influenced by the things they've watched on the internet and just kind of how they've surrounded themselves with this fake culture of what girls should be like. In English especially, with the reading of like Chaucer and the Duchess of Malfi and even the Great Gatsby, I think that the women in the books and through like historically in literary pieces, women have just been over-sexualised completely. I think it just really does influence negative relationships, and yeah, I don't think that it's healthy at all. I think relationships not that at all. I think it's not based on respect. It's definitely just based on lust.
Everyone.
Every other
I'll
one.
put that in.
The thing is, don't feel like laughing's a bad thing, so just go off each other. I'm boy number one.
I'm girl number one.
Okay.
Okay,
I'm boy number one.
I'm boy number two.
Okay. Could you define what you believe pornography to be?
Well, I think it's the sexual... We will get there, by the way. For those that watch it, I think it's the majority of them are boys. I think it changes the way they view women, and often the way they perhaps treat women.
In a positive or negative?
I think in a negative way. I think they hypersexualise women. It can lead them to have false expectations.
You'll end up thinking of women in a more sexual way and not valuing women for who they are, and treating sex a bit like a light topic instead of treating it as a meaningful connection between one person and another. So I think porn is really...
I think it loses its meaning.
Yeah,
I think porn makes the act of sex lose its meaning massively. Well, I personally don't watch porn. I've been exposed to it in the distant past, but I don't watch porn regularly at all. So I feel like it doesn't affect me much, but the people around me that do, I feel like it affects them massively in the way they talk about women, the way they feel, the way they act. When talking about the other sex, they don't strive for a relationship, they strive for a sexual act instead.
I'm a religious person, and so I don't believe in sex until marriage or like wasting of my sperm in any sort of form, and reformed myself. I've seen very big improvements in me and how I view women.
And what got you exposed to porn in the first place? What led you down that path? And how old are you?
I was like 13.
I found the first time I was exposed to porn, I was really almost scarred.
Yeah.
It was the way it was presented. It was unlike anything I thought it would be, and it truly scarred me. It left an imprint on me.
I don't think I can ever go back to watching porn again. Firstly, I'm religious and take my religion very seriously, but
I think it leads down a path of addiction as well.
addiction as
The
well.
people I've seen, they can't stop watching
Yeah.
porn, get urges, they can't control their urge anymore. I think it makes them too complacent with porn instead of actually trying to find a real connection.
The view of sexual acts are meant to be prolonged until marriage, and the only use for like sexual activities is if you're going to procreate, because that's what they believe in Christianity. That if you're to go forth and engage in any sexual acts, it should be to procreate. So ejaculation is a wasting of sperm that God gave us. It goes against my religion in that way.
But it starts off with watching porn minimally, and then for some people it can lead to watching it more and more and more until sometimes the majority of their day is filled with just watching porn because it's such an addiction. It stimulates so much reward in terms of dopamine without actually having accomplished anything. So it sort of gives people a false sense of achievement. And because if they abuse porn, they watch it so often, they're constantly getting pumped with dopamine. It often leads to, I say, depression, because everyday things don't feel as good because porn and masturbation and so on is such a rewarding task while you're doing it. Calm down a bit. I think it makes people more perverted. If they get addicted, it starts off normal and then they get more and more perverted as it goes on, because their brains change so much, because perhaps they watch what's classed as perhaps normal porn, which is the most realistic representation of a sexual act as possible. Obviously it's still staged, and then as their addiction gets worse and worse, they get led on to worse and worse types of porn until it takes a new experience to stimulate them as much as it was the first time, which means they're constantly searching for more and more sorts of porn, and it makes them more perverted. I think it's probably partly the cause of paedophilia as well, I'd say most paedophiles probably abuse porn. In terms of like English and like history, in terms of writing and play, it's always been human nature for the man to sexualise a woman. Like it goes back, it's in biology, whatever. So I don't feel like that has been changed by porn, because porn is more of a new thing. I personally don't feel like porn affects the academic syllabi.
Hello, my name's Father Philip Gratian. I'm the chaplain here at Ellesmere College. So in June, I'll have been ordained for 10 years. The Bible's kind of positive about sex on the whole. There's even a whole book of a love affair, possibly premarital, with some, I'm not very good at the Hebrew, but with some heavy innuendo. It's called the Song of Songs. I've seen sermon series preached on it, which are basically sex manuals for Christians. So the Bible is kind of pro-sex, but it is not pro-objectification. It's a stream through the Bible of the dignity of humankind. Man is not meant for anything else than to be man. Any sense that, as Kant would say, using a human as a means to an end is to be disparaged and to be looked upon with suspicion. You know, it starts with kind of, I'm out on the street and I turn my head because I think someone's pretty at the front and I just wonder whether they're pretty on the back as well. You know, that's objectifying that person, isn't it, for a bit of kind of titillation and arousal. You know, the end of that is riding bodies on a screen that are just there for my kind of physiological enjoyment. That person has been objectified, haven't they? For a start, I think that they are accessing more pornography because kids' talk is more sexualised. The main problem with it is that kids see sex and other human beings on a screen as a way to arouse themselves, and it cuts out all of the kind of tenderness and the vulnerability and the connection that's required really for good sex. It disintegrates the kind of the dignity of the people on the screen, and then makes people think that sex is going to be about pleasing themselves. And anyone who's had sex knows that if you have sex to please yourself, you're onto a loser. But that's part of the same kind of problem of us distancing ourselves from reality by snapping parts of ourselves and sharing it in a way that puts that out into the ether. It's no longer part of me, but it is part of me, and there's a troubling disconnect there, isn't there, between my digital self and my real self. So I think that the pervasiveness of pornography is probably affecting the way that kids are feeling comfortable about doing that. You know, sexting is a thing, and I think probably pornography is partly to blame for that. You know, because that's providing the background to a kind of an objectified view of themselves and their bodies. Say my parents weren't willing to talk to me about what sex was and what it did and all that kind of thing, I could get an education about it from watching pornography. It would be a pretty shoddy education, because it's not portraying it in a true and a meaningful way, but I would at least get some information. But means don't justify ends. We all need a bit of an outlet, sexual outlet. You know, masturbation is important sometimes because otherwise kind of it's an outlet that's required, but that doesn't mean that it should be done in a way that objectifies other people. I once had a pastor who said we should have a banner across the church and said, hypocrites welcome, there are plenty of us here. It's not the point, we're trying to get better. Doesn't mean we're perfect. So of course it will have influenced the church and some of its pronouncements, because we're all sinful.
What do you think, Mr. John?
Like, the solution to porn would be, I don't know if you should really ban it or not, because if you were to ban porn, what would be the further implications that would come with it? Would people be more like sexually active towards women instead of doing it by themselves in their room? Would they be more aggressive to women because they're longing for sex?
I think that would only be a problem if they can't control their urges, and I think those urges are caused by the abuse of porn. I think if you don't abuse porn, don't abuse masturbation, I think men can be able to withhold their urges much better, and they wouldn't go down that path. Ban porn now completely, I think it would have bad effects because we've already got a generation that's grown up in porn.
Because there are different classes of women back in the day. You were either married, a prostitute, or a virgin, and you're either classed in those three ways. So I feel like in this society nowadays, being a single woman isn't really looked down upon. I think that if porn was banned, would actually behave themselves and actually not. Actually, I retract what I just said. I agree with ban porn. Like,
The next generation
wouldn't
would
have the issues that we have.
There's always going to be sexual abuse, there's always going to be sexual
Yeah.
assault, which is a shame.
Yeah.
But I think it's definitely got worse in these times. And also to do with like blackmailing, with like say a woman or a man who's not a porn star sends an image to their partner or perhaps, and then that partner spreads it around the world. They can blackmail that person. There's lots of negative effects. And it's almost become normal nowadays for younger people, men and women, to send pictures of themselves to each other, and perhaps they don't understand the consequences at the time.